Our next inductee is Thomas Doucette. I'd ask you to please join me in welcoming his son, Andy, to the stage to represent his late dad. We're talking here about one of the great builders of sport in Nova Scotia history. I ask you to watch the video screen. Whether it's students he taught or players he coached, they all say the same thing. The late Thomas Doucette lived to educate.
He was big on connections with kids. He took pride in making sure he got to know everybody. His biggest thing was call me Mr. D. He was very informal, but at the same time, he demanded a lot, and he demanded your best every time you did something.
Ultimate team first guy, ultimate instructor. He lived to teach, both professionally as a school teacher, but in the sports world, he loved to teach skills and make people better players. He was very, very passionate about it, yet absolutely determined to be equitable and fair in his treatment of officials, his own players, and the opposition.
He was on the ball field exactly the same way as he was in the classroom. He kind of commanded respect, and he wanted everyone to give everything they had every single time they made a play or did something on the field. He just commanded that every time he was at the field.
And he was at the field a lot. Thomas Doucette was a level 4 certified softball coach and was the head coach for Canada's national junior men's team for almost a decade. He was also head coach for 1 girls and 3 boys Canada Games teams. And when he wasn't on the softball diamond, he coached basketball.
For the work he did, coaching at basically all levels, men, women, juniors, seniors, even setting aside the basketball for a moment, and the lives he impacted in a positive way through that coaching. I don't think you'd find many players who were under his leadership who would have a bad word to say about Tommy.
He was always very positive. Like, even if he didn't have a great game, he took something positive away from that, and he tried to think from a player's perspective as much as possible, knowing that nobody wants to go out and lose or have a bad game or have an 0 for 8 slump or anything like that, and he was always looking for ways to make you better or to get you out of that slump. He never made you feel like you were the reason that something went wrong or you were the reason you lost the game.
That positive, caring approach was never lost on his players or students and is a defining part of the legacy of Thomas Doucette.
I went to Tommy's visitation last summer, and I stood in line for 70 minutes outdoors on a sweltering evening, and I listened to the people around me, and most of these were people in their 30s and 40s, and they were almost all former students of Tommy's. Like I say, this was a warm summer night. They could have been anywhere else, and they were all there to pay the respects to this teacher who had clearly affected their lives in a positive way.
The late Thomas Doucette, educator extraordinaire, and our newest inductee to the Nova Scotia Sport Hall of Fame. Nice, huh? To present the plaque to Andy, the General Manager for Atlantic Canada for FMAV, Henrik Straight Henriksen, and the pin presentation, a Hall inductee as a stellar softball star. You saw him on the video, Mr. Mike Henderson. Thank you, gents. Andy, what are your memories of your dad's insatiable love of coaching?
Biggest thing was that Dad made sure that he gave back to the community, gave back to anybody that had built on his strengths, and then made sure that he touched as many people as he could.
Stories abound about your house being full of people that weren't related to you when, when teams were in town and guys needed places to stay. He was that sort of guy, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah, no, our 79 Glenmore was the hotel in town, and basement was full of anybody from Cape Breton to the South Shore. It was just, if they needed a place to stay, Dad opened the doors.
Well, what do you think was the genesis of his love of teaching? You guys ever talk about that?
See, Dad was raised by his grandmother, and he spent a lot of time learning from others, and he just made sure that he wanted to make sure that anybody that was in his world felt cared for, and so I think that is where that developed.
Yeah. What about, you heard Mike talk about the visitation, people waiting 70, 80 minutes in heat. You must hear a lot of stories from people that come up and say, I knew your dad.
Yeah, it's still difficult to hear him in the past tense, but yeah, he reached people from, all 10 provinces and the territories across, and a lot of those people showed up, and it was really lovely. I think the priest was expecting a little shorter evening, and we stayed for a long time, and it was a nice evening.
What did he mean? He meant a lot to the province and the country. What did he mean, though, to that area in Musquodoboit where you guys lived?
See, Dad was born down here, just down the road in Hennessy, and he moved down there in the early 70s, and that's been his home. And, when you ask him where he's from, he would never say Halifax. He'd say Musquodoboit. And he was well-loved, and he loved the community and the people there.
Right. On behalf of the Hall of Fame, congratulations. Thank you for being here. Thomas Doucette, folks, in the Builder category of the Nova Scotia Sport Hall of Fame.